Stay ahead of the game with the MOJO. We got picks, hot takes, all the info. Mo dropping stats, crunching numbers, that's the vibe. Joe say what he see and feel gon' decide. If you ain't tuning in, throw a flag on the plate. It's going down over here the MOJO way.
And we're back. Well, just me is back. Mo is sick again, unfortunately. I think one kid got sick, and then the other kid got sick. Maurice wasn't completely healthy, and now he's sick again. I'm pretty sure Jess is also sick. So instead of spreading the germs and whatnot, everybody, it seems like, has been sick for the last month. Instead of spreading the germs, I'm going to do this solo. Next week, Mo is also traveling, so he won't be here, but I might have a special guest sit in for Mo. Today, it's just me. I did get some show notes from Mo, though, so I did get some show notes from Mo, though, so there's a better way of saying that than to sound like a rapper. So we're just going to go in and review some games. I don't have a beer of the week. I have water. This is a solo adventure, so it's just me rambling here. We'll get into the Saturday games. First game was the Denver Broncos and the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, everybody knows now the Broncos win in overtime 33-30. So I had to watch this one on my phone because I was at a 90th birthday party. And there was a TV, but the TV, for whatever reason, didn't work, or it wasn't a smart TV. So we just had a bunch of people with their phones out on the table. So all around the table, you just had a bunch of phones. And it was kind of funny because at another table, their stream was ahead of ours somehow, and I went out of the app, went back in. Theirs was still ahead. I don't know what happened, but it was just funny because there was like 10 people standing up, huddled around like this tiny little screen. I mean, it was just comical. It just reminded me of like what, this is like not much smaller than what a TV was back in the day, and we're just like, everybody's got 55-inch TVs for $150, and we're just looking at this little screen. But that's how I watched this game. I was in the company of some Buffalo fans, so we had people at that party that were from Buffalo. Diehard Buffalo Bills fans, and to watch them miss another opportunity while being in their company, it was brutal. It was brutal. Like, the letdown was real. And they were mostly like older, not old, but older, old enough to have lived through and seen the 4 Super Bowl trip that they were on in the early 90s. And just felt bad for them. They've had more success than Washington. I can give them that. At least in recent years, besides last year maybe, but to be in their company and watch that disappointment, the air just got sucked out of the place. Like, oh man! So I definitely felt for him. It was a little bit of an awkward goodbye. I'm like, sorry about the game. No knock on Denver though. Denver played a good game. Their defense is legit. It's just when you see a team, when your team's out of it, like mine is, it's easy to just kind of root for somebody who hasn't been or can't get over that hump, right? So, we've seen Denver win with Peyton in 2015 we were just talking about. The Bills have had success, but they're not getting over that hump. 4 trips to the Super Bowl that they lost, and obviously one of them was against Washington. Yeah, it's rough, for that fan base. It was just rough. And I think talent-wise, I don't think that they had the best squad that they've had in the past. It seemed like a lot of this hinged on Josh Allen. And I think he had to play almost near perfect, which he did not in this game. He is not the sole reason that they lost. You can't blame one player or one play. Or one call. I know that interception at the end was questionable. I mean, it looked like a bang play. It looked like he caught it, and then it just got ripped out. Who knows? If they looked into it further, maybe they would have said, oh, okay, he was down. But it was just so bang, bang. I don't know. It looked like an interception to me. And I know that McDermott was saying that in the post game, and I think he was maybe just trying to harp on that a little bit to say, hey, if they had reviewed that, different ball game. But it just seems like every year Buffalo is like 1 or 2 plays away from taking that next step. And, on a year where you didn't have Mahomes and like the Chiefs juggernaut, right, as we've seen in recent years, you didn't have Mahomes in your way. You didn't have Lamar in your way. You didn't have Burrow in your way. This was the year. Everybody said this was the year for Buffalo to do something. And, they didn't do themselves any favors. Not to say that they would have won that division. I think it would have been tough with New England going 14-3. But having to play on the road, you had to go to Jacksonville, and that was a tough game because Jacksonville, I think, was kind of underrated this year. Then they have to go to Denver. That's a tough place to play regardless, right? And then they're the number 1 seed. They have a great defense. And if they had won that, they wouldn't have had to travel too much, but they would have had to play on the road at New England, which is also, the travel wouldn't have been that bad, and the weather wouldn't have really affected them. But, the fan base and being on the road in a playoff game, I can't imagine that that's an easy place to play. So, and obviously there's a couple big pieces of information that came out of this game. The first thing that happened, I was driving home after watching this game on my phone, and I get a text from Mo, and I get a text from my cousin, and it said that Bo Nix broke his ankle. Done for the playoffs. My immediate thought was, you have to be fucking kidding me. You have to be fucking kidding me. It was one thing that Denver won, and they had the home field advantage, the number 1 seed, great defense, but, you're losing your starting quarterback. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. And I'll get to that point as I move on here. The other big news was Sean McDermott got let go yesterday by the Bills. Maurice has been calling for his head for a few years now on this show, and it finally happened. It finally caught up to him. It's a little bit weird. I feel like maybe he's kind of just a fall guy right now. It's hard to say. Obviously, some changes need to be made because they're not getting over that hump. And one thing that I will say, and I don't know, time will tell if this is the right move or not, but what I will say is good on Buffalo for making a change, right? And I'm not saying that it was the right move, but good on them for making a change, because we've seen teams like Pittsburgh, for instance, right? They finish over 500 every year. They make the wild card, and then they immediately get bounced every year, right? For how many years has this been going on for? And they just wouldn't make the move on Tomlin. And I don't know, I don't know if it's his fault or not, but over a period of time, you'd think you'd make some changes here. And it took Mike Tomlin to step down in order for that to happen. So many years where you're getting into Josh Allen's prime, and they made a move. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but they're taking a chance. They've had more success in recent years than Pittsburgh, and they're at least saying, we're going to try to get over this hump. I know Maurice had mentioned, yes, that was his hot take, and it hit. He also mentioned that the GM there getting promoted is stupid. And I would agree with that. Their GM got promoted to president. I think, some of the blame for the roster could be on the GM. The other guy making those moves and trades and signings and all that stuff. And McDermott is playing the guys that you give him. And I really don't feel like they did him any favors this year. I said this last year, and they actually did pretty well last year. And Josh Allen had an MVP season. I thought that they didn't have the weapons that they had the year before. And then this year was even worse. So who's to blame there? I think it's odd that you promoted the GM who put this roster in place to president, and then McDermott is kind of the fall guy. Yeah, it's just it was just weird. I don't know where they go from here. Do they get Bill Belichick? Can you imagine? Ooh. Not saying that it will happen or he would do anything necessarily, but man, can you imagine? Can you imagine Bill going to the Bills? Double Bill squared, going on the road to Foxborough to play his former team that gave up on him. So I noticed a lot of people after Brady left, it seemed like a lot of people were pulling back. It used to be during the run, Brady's the GOAT and Bill's the GOAT as a coach, right? And then when Brady left and the success kind of like faltered, it was, Bill's not that good. Brady masked a lot of his stuff. I'm like, I don't know. I think they needed each other. That's just what it is. But man, can you imagine if Bill goes to the Bills? Yeesh. Those matchups would be fun. So now, after the Bills fired McDermott, the head coaching vacancy was up to 10. The Titans, as of this morning, signed, I believe they finished the contract with Robert Saleh as their new head coach. And I was just reading yesterday that Tennessee would be nobody's first choice, which I get. I'm not familiar with their ownership group to know if that's on them or not. But, you have a top 3 pick again. You have a young quarterback in Cam Ward that you can build around. You have $100 million in cap space, and you have a new stadium on the way. So maybe not the most ideal job on paper, but when you look at these kind of things, you can do something here, right? I don't know what the free agent list looks like. I'm hearing it's not like maybe a ton of guys, but I feel like that they say that every year, so who knows? I don't know what their draft capital is, but again, just those points alone, it has to be somewhat attractive of a place. And to be honest, I think Robert Saleh got a bad break in New York, right? They kind of fed him Aaron Rodgers, whether he wanted him or not, and then they traveled to London, and then they fired him immediately. Okay, I'd be pissed. All right, I would be pissed. The Dolphins also hired a new coach. They hired Jeff Hafley from the Packers as their head coach after the Mike McDaniel firing. Who else? I think since we last talked, it was John Harbaugh finished his contract with the Giants, which it was kind of expected, right? They have a lot of upside. You potentially have your franchise quarterback. You have a stud wide receiver who's recovering. You have a stud running back. You, on paper, have a great defensive line. You have a high draft pick. It's New York, New Jersey. So, yeah, I think that there was a lot of upside there. And for Harbaugh, it just probably made the most sense, right? I think on paper, they were the most attractive destination. However, now with Buffalo, man, that's going to be somebody's going to be licking their chops to get that job. Somebody's going to go in there and potentially get the opportunity to take a team that's been, fairly dominant. I mean, successful, right? They make the playoffs. They usually kind of get bounced around that divisional round, but it's like you're inheriting a good team, right? And a former MVP in Josh Allen. That's going to be the most ideal job now, I would say. And I think for the other openings, if Sean McDermott, I'm sure the emotions are running high, right? This is, everything's coming at you at once, right? The last 5-6 years, however long he's been there, is all coming back around at once. There's probably a lot of emotion here, right? Because now you're running through all these scenarios of this last game, the regular season, years past and whatnot. It's probably a lot of emotions to just go ahead and jump into a new job. But I would assume that McDermott's going to have the pick of the litter if he wanted it, right? Think about some of the destinations he could go. Pittsburgh, Baltimore. I mean, if you go to Baltimore, that's another position. That's another job, right? You go to Baltimore, you get Lamar, right? And I think Lamar was, he was obviously dealing with some injuries this year. But that's another job. Like, the last 2 MVPs, outside of this season, the last 2 MVPs need head coaches. It's got to be a prime spot for even a McDermott. Imagine that. Whew. Imagine if he went to Baltimore, went from Josh Allen to Lamar. Man. Whew. We'll see what happens. Moving on to the Saturday night game anyway. The Seattle Seahawks over the San Francisco 49ers, 41-6. Maurice didn't see much of this game. I got to make sure that I keep looking at my Mo notes. He didn't really watch much of that game. Game was immediately over, and the Seahawks are Maurice's favorite as of right now. Well, I mean, with that defense, I think the 49ers had an uphill battle. We talked about it last week. They didn't have Kittle. They've had a number of injuries all season, and I think that this was a successful season leading up to this game. Darnold had an injury going into it. They said he had an oblique injury. He obviously played this game. I think if Darnold can just kind of keep his composure and not have the game that Maurice has been saying is going to happen for him, those 3-4 interception games, if he can just play a steady game next week, they probably have a good shot. They are at home. Their defense is if not the best, it's what, top 3, top 5 in the league. And it really showed there. So sad news for the 49ers, but I think what they had this year, they had just as many injuries as Washington, and look at what they did versus what we did, right? So I think that's really a testament to their roster, but also their coaching. Kyle Shanahan obviously did a fantastic job with that roster this season. So Seattle advances to the conference championship. The Niners, unfortunately, have to wait another year. We'll see what happens in the offseason with them. The Sunday games. Leading off, the New England Patriots at home, 28, the Texans 16. Oh, man. I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but I will be. Just for a little bit. When you look at this game on paper, right, and good on New England because they had the number 2 seed, so outside of playing Denver, which they will next week, they get the home field advantage, right? That is a huge key. And I think the Chargers with a banged-up O-line going cross-country, they played pretty well, really. I thought the Chargers played pretty well on defense. Their offense killed them. And for this, it was pretty much the same. I think the Texans' defense, they held them to 21, really, because the 7 was a pick 6. I think the Texans' defense did pretty well. They disrupted the game. They caused some fumbles. But their offense just, CJ had 4 interceptions with like 6 minutes to go in the second quarter. It was crazy. It was a very, very sloppy game. They just kept giving it away. And really, they ultimately only lost by 12. And if you take away that other touchdown, that pick 6, that doesn't happen. You're looking at a 5-point game. Obviously, 16 points is not enough to win you the game. Those offensive struggles were real. It was unfortunate coming into this game that Nico Collins was out, right? Everybody knew going into this game. It's like your number 1 wide receiver is out. Then really early in this game, Dalton Schultz had a calf injury and never came back, right? That's his number 2 weapon. I'm not saying that's why they lost. It's just, it's an unfortunate part of you're missing key players, your number 1 and 2 receivers. But some of those throws by CJ, I don't know if the crowd just got in his head or, also let's give credit to New England's defense because I think that they were kind of giving him different looks and rattling him, and he was throwing the ball when he shouldn't have been, right? Take the sack, throw it away. There was a couple where I don't know if it was the pick 6 where he just kind of threw it up, and it's like, dude, just take the sack, man. I'd rather take a 20-yard loss on a sack than a pick or a pick 6, So, good on their defense. I think that they capitalized on it, and unfortunately, Houston just didn't have the firepower. They just were not. They were not running the ball well in the first half. Second half, they kind of came out a little bit better, but they're missing their top 2 targets. It is difficult, but I think a lot of the decision making by CJ, that was kind of the biggest problem. Sorry, let me just jump back before I miss my spot here with Mo, because he's not here. I can't bounce this shit off of him, and I don't want to forget his notes. Patriots still haven't beaten somebody or something. Now, I didn't ask him this, and he can let us know here. The way it was worded, I was thinking that there's always an asterisk with the Patriots win. And I don't know if maybe he's saying that to be like, here's another one. And because Nico was out and Schultz was out, it's like, we still didn't beat anybody good. That's how I took it. I don't know if that's how he meant it. You know, you can't blame, because you know what? I will say this. For you know, living in the area, being a fan of another team from outside of this area, who in my lifetime hasn't been very good. Bad, really. What am I talking about? They've been pretty fucking bad. You know, when you live in this area and they're winning again, right? It's for when you're not a fan of that team, it sucks. It's hard because you're surrounded by all these people that are like, you know, cheering on their team that's doing well. And they went to shit. I don't even know how many conference championship games they went to since 2001. But I mean, they went to 9 Super Bowls. They won 6. You know, it's just, there's a lot of like, ugh, right? That's kind of the vibe from everybody around here that's not a Patriots fan. It's just like, oh, come on, not again. And, you know, so that's where that frustration is coming from, right? And especially when you're looking at your own team, like, man, why can't we have even a fucking smidgen of that success, right? So you kind of look at everything with that mindset, right? But it's not New England's fault that, you know, they had an easy schedule. It's not their fault that, you know, the Chargers had a fucking banged up O-line, right? It's not their fault that Nico was out and Schultz got hurt. And New England has been mainly healthy. I know Mo made a note about Will Campbell's knee is still maybe giving him some problems. I thought he played pretty well for the most part in that Texans game. You know, but they've kind of been mainly healthy. Campbell missed some time, and maybe he's still dealing with a lingering issue with his knee. I know Booty missed some time. Somebody else on defense had just missed some time. But for the most part, they've been mainly healthy, right? That's also not their fault. Bo Nix getting hurt, breaking his ankle. And that's not New England's fault. It sucks for when you're not a fan. I tell you, it sucks. As soon as I read that, I go, you got to be fucking kidding me, because then it just feels like you've already had such an easy schedule and it's just shit just keeps kind of going your way. You know, from the outside, that's how we look at it. We're like, oh my God, what else could fucking go? What else can go your way? You know, you advance to the conference championship, you have to play on the road, and their starting quarterback gets hurt on the last fucking play or the second to last play of the game, and he's out for the rest of the playoffs, right? So you do look at it like that. But it's not New England's fault. It's not necessarily the fans' fault either, right? They're just, everybody's excited again. I will throw this out there, right? Again, not to be a Debbie Downer, but just because you're winning now, and I think that just, you know, it's hard because I think that their judgment is clouded because it's their team, right? But from the outside, I will say, not saying it's full delusion, but I will say that there's a little bit of maybe optimistic delusion, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think it's a little delusional to say, oh, look at how good they're doing, right? And they're in the conference championship game, and, you know, they could win it all this year, and Drake's only 23. I think that you're assuming that this is Brady all over again, right? And even from the outside, right? If you're thinking this is Brady all over again, I'm not saying that they won't win or they won't be good, but let's temper the expectations, right? On both sides, right? Because if you're against New England and, you know, you're a Jets fan, or you just live in this area and you like another team, calm down a little bit, right? I mean, across the board, it seemed like this was a wide open year, right? There was 10 head coaches that got fired. You know, like Washington finished 5-12 and has the number 7 pick in the draft, which is, you know, it's pretty crazy. I think even number 8, whoever's at number 8 is also at 5-12, right? So it's kind of a down year for the league, and it was kind of wide open. Some of your juggernauts didn't play well, right? The Chiefs looked like a shell of themselves all season. You know, they did have an easier schedule, right? That is something to note. I mean, it's the easiest schedule in fucking 20 years or something like that, right? That is something to note. But it's like, just because they're doing well right now doesn't mean that Drake May is going to be Tom Brady or better, right? I think that's, the natural reaction from Patriots fans, like, oh, he's only 23. Like, okay, what does that mean? He's going to play till he's 43? You think he's going to play 20 years and win you 6 Super Bowls? Maybe. Some of that, optimism, that delusional optimism is fun. I think because this is year 2 and you're just, I think because you've seen this story before on both sides, you've seen this story before, you're assuming either the best or the worst, right? And it's like, just relax, right? If you're a fan of the Patriots, just enjoy this season, right? I will say, like, it does suck because I don't feel like, the fan base has suffered enough, right? Unless you're older, but honestly, I think even the older crowd, it's like, what could you possibly have bitched at this point? Like, they started in 1960, right? Okay, like those early years, or like maybe like the late 80s and early 90s, but it's like you made it in 85, you made it in 96, and then 5 years later, you went on this run. So I think even the older crowd is a little bit skewed. I think they've gotten a little bit, it's not like that whole thing where, well, if you're under 40, you don't have no right to whatever, right? I think even the older crowd has obviously in the last 20 plus years has gotten very used to winning, right? So there is that aspect too. But everybody just relax. Just relax, all right? Enjoy this season. You had a couple bad seasons in a row, 4-13, right? The other seasons were like, you guys were like mediocre, you made the playoffs, or you got bounced, or you just missed the playoffs, right? Those are bad, but they're not like bad. Like you had 2 really, really bad seasons. So just enjoy this. Just enjoy this season for what it is. It's like, stop looking at, oh man, this is going to be every year again, right? This is going to be Tom Brady 2.0. Like, just relax and have fun with this, right? And on the flip side, for people like me, we'll nitpick their schedule and every injury that happened on teams that they played against, and we'll try to say, let's hope that this isn't Tom Brady 2.0. Let's hope that this isn't the second fucking dynasty wave, right? Everybody just fucking relax. Trust me, I don't want to see another New England Super Bowl. I don't. Be honest, I don't. But just see how it goes, man. Just let this play out. See how it goes. And I think, again, right, I'm talking from my perspective as much as possible because that's all I have, really. It's kind of like, not all of the Patriots fans, because they get upset when I say this. Not every Patriots fan, but there's a lot of them that had just kind of woken up from the dead in the last couple of years. And I think that there comes, during that run with Brady and stuff, there was that level, there was an arrogance level, right? There was a cockiness level. I remember before the 2007 season, before the season started, all the fans, we're going undefeated. We're going undefeated. And it was like all year. And like they did up until the Super Bowl. But like when you're not a fan and around here, it's like, man, there's a little bit of the level of arrogance and cockiness is like, ugh. So people don't want to see that again. I get it, right? But there are people like Maurice and Jess and Mel, like they watched every game last season when they were 4-13. They watched every game the year before when they were 4-13. So I don't mean it for everybody individual. I think I'm just, summarizing from the perspective of the non-Patriots fan living in the area. That's kind of the vibe, right? But everybody, lower your expectations just a little bit. Mo also, what did he say? Drake needs to protect the ball better, but also only winning quarterback against Texans to throw for 3 touchdowns. Will Campbell's knees giving him issues. We aren't playing with house money anymore, and we should beat a backup quarterback who hasn't thrown a ball in a regular season game in 2 years. He's the only backup quarterback not to take a snap this year. It's an uphill battle. I think, what is it? Jarrett Stidham as a starter is 1-2, 1-3, right? To Mo's point, hasn't played in 2 years. So we keep talking about it, especially last year and this year, the overall importance of the backup quarterback, right? Whether he's fluffing his guy or not, Sean Payton seems to be, at least in front of the camera, that he's confident in Stidham, right? I think there has to be a level of confidence to have a backup quarterback, right? Because injuries happen. It's a long season. It's, off season and preseason and 17 games and then the playoffs. Shit happens. You have to make sure you have a quality quarterback that fits your system, right? We saw it this year with Mariota. He had to play a bunch of games, right? You have to invest in your backup quarterback. And I'm not saying that he is necessarily on the same level as Bo Nix, right? I think everybody would agree that the number one seed in the playoffs losing their starting quarterback, right? Because I don't know if people would nitpick and be like, well, his numbers aren't that great. Okay. I mean, the number one seed in either conference losing their starting quarterback, I would argue that any fucking team in the playoffs that loses their starting quarterback, you're at a disadvantage because you're starting quarterback for a reason. So it's going to be an uphill battle. I think he's right with Drake. I think he's the last couple of weeks. Now that you're in the playoffs, you're playing better defenses. I think the Chargers played well in that game. I think the Texans defense played pretty well in that game. Right. There's a level of protecting the ball. I mean, there's been some fumbles. He recovered a couple, but he's playing better defenses. So, for the most part in the regular season, if you look at it, I think 12. I would count the Raiders too because they finished at like 14. 13 of 17 games were against teams that were in like the bottom half of the league, right? The defenses. Outside of like the Bills and I forget who else was up in that list, but the majority of their games they were playing against the bottom half of the league's defenses. So now they're in the playoffs, they're playing better defenses, and but also New England's defense has played better too, right? We can't just look at the injuries from the Texans or the Chargers. You have to look at what New England's defense was also doing, right? And I think that they were really disrupting CJ in that game. The Chargers never seemed to get it going, and I think it was probably a combination of both, and the same thing with the Texans game. But also give credit to New England's defense for keeping those offenses at a minimum, right? They gave up, 3 points and 16 points? Yeah, right. They had injuries for sure, but that's New England's job is whether you have injuries or not, I have to capitalize on it. So, good on them for doing that too. So New England advances. Texans, unfortunately, stop short again, but in CJ's first 3 years, he's won a playoff game each of those 3 years. How does he get over the hump? Who knows, right? Might need some weapons. I mean, obviously the injuries didn't help him, but, also didn't play a great game. So we'll see what happens with the Texans. The Sunday night game is the Rams and the Bears, right? The knock on the Rams and Stafford is, playing in bad weather and cold and blah, 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 right? But the Rams last year playing against the team who won the Super Bowl played pretty good in that championship game, right? It was snowing. It came down to that final drive. So, I assume this would be a close game, especially with Chicago being at home, right? Caleb at the end, that throw, he backpedaled from the 20 to the 40 and just heaved it. And he had his guy wide open in the end zone. That was a play where I was like, holy shit. Like out loud, by myself, on the couch, no one around, verbally talking to myself. Holy shit. And I was texting people, did you see that fucking throw by Caleb? Man, Mo had a note on this too. I don't want to forget. Bears, coaches need to learn to take the points. It's freezing cold and snowing. They're probably not, probably will not be a lot of offense. Kick a fucking field goal. Yeah, there is something with that. And I think the Texans did that early in the game too. When they were down 7-0, they went for the 3, right? The Chargers, when they got that interception against New England early in the game last week, I think they went for it on 4th and didn't get it. It's like, all right, well, we got New England pinned, but you could have just stole 3 points because you got the interception, right? It sucks. Go for it. I think those 4th and 1s or 4th and 2s in certain spots, I think it's good that the league goes for it more on 4th. Because in years past, you wouldn't even fucking think of 4th and 2. Hell no. Now it's like analytics, and you put the pressure on the defense. But in certain scenarios, like the playoffs in a cold game, to Mo's point, is just take the fucking points, right? You know, like the Chargers last week, just he could have stole 3, right? And it wouldn't have mattered, I guess. They lost, but it doesn't matter. It's like, you know, pick your shots, right? You want to be aggressive early, that's fine, but then you're leaving points on the board, right? You got a field goal. Yeah, it sucks. Well, we get the interception and we're on the 5 and we have to fucking kick it. Hey, it is what it is. Could have taken the 3 points. So I think, you know, teams are getting, you know, more gutsy, and Ben Johnson comes from that in Detroit where they go for it on 4th, right? Dan Campbell will go for it on 4th and 18. I don't give a shit, right? That's kind of been their mantra. So, you know, good on them. It came down, you know, the interception in overtime kind of sealed it for them. But, you know, the Bears had a great year, you know, knocking off Green Bay after being down 18 at home. You know, that says something. I think, you know, they finally have their franchise quarterback, right? We were saying it last year. You got to be patient with Caleb, right? He's in his first year. Just because you saw Jaden ball out doesn't mean that Caleb sucks or Drake sucks, right? Or Bo, right? You know, everybody relax a little bit. And, you know, you got a competent offensive mind in there with Caleb. And look at what they did this year, right? They won the North. They knocked off their division rival, the Packers. They almost knock off the Rams here, right? In an overtime game where the Rams were, up until a certain point this season, they were like the team. Like they were like the only team that you would say, like, man, they're like good, right? At some point. Well, Matthew Stafford, let's see, can he pull it off? Could he pull off winning MVP and winning a Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP? I think even Mo would have to agree. And me. He's got to be in the hall for that one, right? Especially in a year where we weren't sure if he was going to retire or not, right? Everybody kind of forgets that. He was like on the fence about coming back after that championship game, and you know, then he comes out and, you know, I would say that he's probably got a slight edge over Drake in the MVP conversation. I guess if you're just looking at yards and touchdowns, but you know, it's a close race anyway. But him even just being in a race like that when he almost retired, that says a lot too. So Rams advance, and the Bears, unfortunately, back to Chicago. But if you're a Bears fan, I think you have a lot to look forward to. So there's that. Let me see. Before I go on to the picks, you know what? I'm going to assume who Maurice is picking because he didn't actually tell me. I know for one game, but he also said the Seahawks are his favorite. So I don't think I missed anything else on the Mo notes. We're already at the conference championship. Holy shit. 17 games, and the weeks go by super fast. And here we are, January, Sunday. Well, you know what? Let me hit the button, right? Because then I feel like, you know, this is like an official... This is an official podcast with Maurice. So let's make some picks. Sunday, January 24th. This is why Mo does this, because I already fucked it up. On the third thing I said, I fucked it up. Conference championships. Sunday. Wait, let me do this again. Sunday, January 25th. In the year of our Lord 2026, as Maurice would say. You have the 14-3 New England Patriots. I guess the records don't matter anymore, but I'm still going to say it just so you know. The 14-3 New England Patriots travel to the 14-3 Denver Broncos. Your New England Patriots are favored by 5.5. Now, Mo would pick the Patriots anyway, right? As I did last year when Washington played Philly, right? Why are you going to pick against your team now? Makes no fucking sense. Bo being out is bad. What Denver has going for them is they're at home, right? It's not an easy place to play. They are at home. I think Stidham's been with the team for 3 years now, I believe. He was there when Sean Payton came in. So he's been with the team. He knows the system. He's been there for 3 years. They have a really good defense. I I think, given the situation, I think that New England being favored by 5.5 is accurate or fair, right? Denver's the number 1 seed. New England's the number 2 seed, right? I think the Bo Nix thing really, really sucks for Denver. But you know what? I like a good underdog story, right? And it's an underdog story for the number 1 seed, right? And the team that's playing at home. And personally, I don't want to see the Patriots win. I just don't, right? I watched the game against the Texans. I sat there with Mel and her father and his girlfriend, who are all Patriots fans. And, I don't have many reactions to the, plays that I like and plays I don't like. I just kind of just sit there because I don't, it's also, I don't want to fucking rain on somebody else's parade, right? I mean, even though I am sick of it. I'm so sick of the fucking Patriots shit. But I also don't want to rain on somebody else's parade while I'm watching the game with them, right? So at some points, Mel would just look over and be like, "Do you hate this?" And I go, "Yeah, I hate this." So, I'm gonna take the Broncos as the underdog story here, right? They lost their starting quarterback right at the end of the divisional round. That's what I'm gonna take. Maurice. I'll speak for Maurice. Maurice is going to take the Patriots. He's going to ride this wave, as he should, right? I don't have a final score prediction. I hope it's a good game. I think maybe if Stidham can just play efficiently and Denver's defense can do what they do, they keep it close and they have a shot at this game, right? But if New England goes out and blows it wide open, or Stidham just starts doing like a CJ from last week, they're in for a long game. But for now, I will take the pay. I don't even have to write this down. How am I going to forget 2 fucking games, right? That game is also on at 3 o'clock. See, this is why he does this. That game is on at 3 o'clock on CBS and Paramount Plus. On the same day, Sunday, January 25th, 2026, at 6:30 p.m. on Fox, right? That's how he does it, right? It's so much cleaner. The Los Angeles Rams at 12-5, traveling to the Seattle Seahawks at 14-3. The Seattle Seahawks are favored by 2.5. Also a fair margin, I think, because of, the Rams have the Stafford effect. So I would say that it shouldn't be too favorable, right? 2.5, 3, up to 3 is kind of like the home field advantage call, because it's like, could go either way. I think if Darnold, as I just said about Stidham, if Darnold can play that game and be efficient and not have the turnovers, I think Seattle's defense is rearing to go. They're going to have their work cut out for them against the Rams, especially Stafford, right? We'll see what happens. I don't expect a 41-6 game that Seattle just had. I think this one will be within a touchdown. I'm going to go with the Seahawks in this one, right? They are the number 1 seed. The way they played last week, there's no reason for me to pick against them other than the Stafford effect. Maurice saying that the Seahawks are his favorite. I would say that he is also picking the Seahawks to win this game. So my potential Super Bowl matchup is Denver versus Seattle, and Maurice's potential Super Bowl battle is New England versus Seattle, which we've seen this before, haven't we? Hopefully a different outcome, though. All right, I'm just kidding. I'm not really, but I don't want to be too negative. Shit, I wish there was a hot take that I could make up on Jess's behalf. I forgot, and I don't really have one off rip. So anyway, Maurice and family, get well soon. We'll see Maurice back here probably right before the Super Bowl, right? We're gonna have a special guest next week. Maurice is traveling, so he will not be around. So I have a special guest next week. So unfortunately, Maurice spent his birthday sick, but he got to watch the Patriots advance to the conference championship game. So until next time. Bye.